A lot of you commute on a bike like this, but have you considered the scenario where you accidentally take a 300-mile detour through the most rugged off-road routes in Death Valley? Let's see what would happen. I've been using this CBR as a commuter bike for a long while. Lately, I've been living in the middle of nowhere, so my commute has involved dirt and gravel roads, a sand wash, beat-up paved roads, and a sprint down the freeway. As such, I've had the bike outfitted with slightly more dirt-oriented tires. I've temporarily removed the more delicate pieces of bodywork so that nothing gets damaged, and I added a little skid plate to protect the delicate oil sump under the bike. It has proven to be very well suited for such a commute. But not too long ago, the Rocky Mountain ATV MC guys asked me to join them on an epic adventure ride through the most rugged terrain in Death Valley, and this was the only bike I had that wasn't down for maintenance. I had to either decline the ride and sit at home in misery, or commit to attempting it on my commuter bike. After a look at the proposed routes using OnX Off-Road, I estimated that if I just went along carefully, I stood some chance of not ending up like the Death Valley Germans. So I committed, and dubbed the CBR as the adventure bike we have at home. Heading out on the morning of the ride, it was very intimidating being surrounded by fully fledged, no-compromise adventure bikes, and wondering if I'd be the person to ruin the ride by not being able to clear a gnarly section or something of that sort. But the first section of the ride was quite easy, just a nice, meandering ride through the valley on the paved highway where my DIY ADV bike felt amazing. Almost as if it was made exactly for that. Just as soon as the tires were warmed up on the pavement, we hopped off of it and cut through the basin on a basic, chill dirt road. Still, the ADV bike we have at home was super fun, quite comfortable, and was getting along just fine. The occasional ding of a pebble ringing the skid plate was the only reminder that this bike was slightly out of its element. As we started climbing up into the hills, the road became more and more rocky and rugged. At this point, the handling of the bike was less than stellar, but I wouldn't say it made it sketchy. There were moments here and there where I'd feel a little touch on the skid plate, which prompted me to stay aware of ground clearance and choose my lines carefully. The route continued to degrade as we pushed onward, but at the same rate that my rig was becoming more and more misfit for the situation, I was getting better and better at handling it and picking lines, so it was all working out. Eventually we were in terrain that seemed more suited to straight up dirt bikes, and found ourselves at the bottom of a gnarly climb that was made more complicated by a broken down Jeep hogging the main line. As I watched the other folks tackle the climb and realized that it was going to be quite slippery without much room for error, I let more and more air out of my tires in hopes that I might just stand a chance at making the bottom quarter of the climb. But as it would turn out, the low, sporty chassis makes the ADV bike at home a bit of a cheater mobile when it comes to gnarly climbs. The low center of gravity, kids bike seat height, and smooth, strong power made it super easy to just carefully chug up a bit of the climb, stop and adjust my line mid-attempt, and get going again without struggling for control at all. It was after that climb that I finally took the largest sigh of relief of my life and felt confident that the bike was indeed adventure-worthy. Another shining example of the sheer supremacy of operating on a shoestring budget. And then we were on the flattest, easiest dirt road of the whole day, and there was one medium-sized rock in the middle of the road that I somehow didn't notice, and I managed to roll over it, which knocked my chintzy skid plate loose and shattered all confidence. With the skid plate now safety wired and zip tied somewhat in place, I dared not risk any damage to my beloved and very much indispensable means of arriving at work, and finished the rest of that day's ride pretending that there was a fragile egg cradled under the bike that I couldn't risk damaging, which, as you might imagine, is not the best way to enjoy an epic adventure. Overall, the adventure bike we have at home / commuter bike accidentally detoured through Death Valley felt like a 95% success. It made it through the whole ride that day. It didn't get damaged or devalued. It wasn't really a struggle. The suspension isn't half bad, believe it or not, and that engine is ironically one of the best and most capable things I've ever felt off-road. But it's that last 5% which is a little bit of a showstopper, and that's just the lack of ground clearance. However, I feel that some easy improvements could be made to the bike protection and ground clearance, and the result would be a legitimately quite capable and fun setup. So that's what I'd recommend focusing on for anyone curious about trying a similar setup. Bikes of this kind do tend to be a third or a half of the price of adventure bikes, and they are very easy to find, so maybe it's not such a crazy idea to try out. Rocky Mountain ATV MC has a much more professionally developed full video series about this ride posted on their YouTube, so I'll have that linked on this end screen, and I'd recommend giving it a watch.